From the aftermath of World War II, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted in 1948. The UDHR's basic universal human rights are the freedom of thought, conscience and religion, of speech and expression, the right to public assembly, the right to democracy, to marry and have a family, the right to have affordable housing, medicine, education and childcare, and to be cared for when we are old. The right not to be tortured or suffer cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment, the right to a fair trial, to move with freedom, the right to choose what work you do, not to be a slave, the ability for rest and recreation. Everyone has the right to benefit from scientific and economic enhancement. Sounds pretty ideal, and if this was the world we lived in, it would be an appealing place to be. However, not everyone in this world experiences the human rights listed here. As Santos states, we face a disturbing reality. A large majority of the world's inhabitants are not subjects of human rights. Some argue, is the UDHR worth the paper it's written on? Or a group of Western leaders manipulating the rest of society by enforcing their political worldview onto others, while neglecting independent national and cultural identity? It's more complicated than we think. The UN makes laws but have no way to enforce the law. They rely on the goodwill of the nation states that make up the UN. But not everybody wants to play ball. Some question the moral compass of personal human rights and liberty as opposed to the benefit of the collective us. Suggesting human rights and civil liberty has led us as societies into neoliberalism and capitalism, which for those who oppose it see it as the demise of our modern culture. Their argument is that the rhetoric of centuries ago about personal rights and freedom were the basis for the French and American revolutions. Depending on which side of the fence or trenches you were on, revolution could mean separate things. Scholars call that context. For example, back in 1798, Napoleon used the same speech of bringing freedom and liberty from oppression to the people of Egypt, then felt justified in invading Egyptian soil. Those who question the validity of the UN state that it was formed and run essentially by the Western world, and because of that, the UDHR doesn't do enough to represent minorities of politics, culture, religion, gender, and sexual orientation. The UDHR may have had its issues, but in the past 70 years since its inception, there have been major shifts in attitudes in civil rights, children and women's rights, the rights of the disabled, and the rights of LGBT communities. The Global Citizens Commission acknowledges the UDHR may have had its difficulties trying to adapt and legitimately enforce its laws, but it certainly has given weight and strength to those who wish to protest for reforms, and like a tall wall, blocks those who discriminate others. To conclude, if we didn't have a body like the UN to set high ethical standards for our global society, there would be no recourse for those who are oppressed. The UDHR provides a common conscience for humanity, a beacon of ethics in an often dark and troubled world.